Corporate parties weren't my thing, and Lauren knew that. I'd gone to a few over the years, mostly out of obligation, smiling at strangers, sipping overpriced cocktails, pretending to care about quarterly earnings and departmental synergy. This one was no different, hosted at some sleek rooftop bar in downtown Austin with dim lighting, soft jazz, and panoramic views of the skyline. I hadn't planned on attending. Lauren had said it wasn't important, that it was just another team-building night, and I'd taken that at face value. But around 7:30, something in me shifted. It wasn't a suspicion, not yet. Just a strange, restless pull. I got dressed in silence, choosing a dark shirt she once said brought out my eyes, even though I wasn't in the mood for compliments. The drive there was quiet. I didn't play music, didn't scroll messages at red lights. I was just going. I couldn't explain it then, and even now, I wonder if I already knew what I was about to see. The venue was buzzing when I arrived. People with name tags I didn't recognize milled around with plastic flutes of champagne. There was laughter everywhere, nervous, loud, or half-hearted depending on the person. I scanned the crowd automatically, not really expecting to find her so quickly, but there she was. Near the bar. Standing a little too close to someone. I froze. She was facing him, angled slightly inward. Her posture was relaxed, open in a way I hadn't seen in months. She was laughing, but it was the kind of laugh you don't fake for a coworker. It rolled from her chest, natural and soft, the way she used to laugh with me when we were alone in our kitchen. I didn't recognize the man, but I took in his presence instantly. Tall, mid-30s, fitted blazer, smug grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. I walked closer. Slow, steady steps. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. And then she leaned in and whispered something in his ear, something I'll never know. Her hand touched his briefly. It wasn't a flirtatious gesture, not in the obvious way, but it was familiar. That was the part that shattered something small inside me, the ease of it. She'd done this before. Many times. A minute later, she turned and saw me. Her eyes widened for half a breath, and I saw it, the flash of panic. Gone as quickly as it came. She pulled her hand back as though it had been caught in something shameful, plastered on a wide, casual smile, and glided toward me. "Oh, Brandon," she said, reaching out. "This is Josh from Supply. We were just going over some logistics." He told this ridiculous joke. I was dying. Josh nodded, gave me a firm handshake, and made some vague comment about shipping delays. I smiled, but I didn't hear a word. I was still trying to piece together the second of silence between them when they saw me. The rest of the evening passed like a movie I didn't want to be in. She clung to my arm more than usual, laughed at jokes too loudly, and introduced me to people I had no interest in meeting. The wine tasted flat. The hors d'oeuvres were pointless. She checked her phone twice, texting quickly when she thought I wasn't looking. She smiled at me often, too often, like someone performing sincerity. I nodded through conversations, letting the noise wash over me while my mind returned to that moment by the bar. The way she touched his wrist. The whispered words. The unguarded joy on her face, joy that had nothing to do with me. By the time we left, the sky had turned a dull navy and the air was thick with humidity. We took the elevator down in silence, both pretending nothing had changed. In the parking garage, I unlocked the car without a word. She slid into the passenger seat gracefully, adjusted her coat, and let her hand rest near the gearshift, not touching me but not far. I drove. The city lights flickered past the windows, neon and amber, and all I could think about was the perfume in the car. It wasn't hers. I knew what Lauren wore, subtle, floral, something she had picked out together with her sister in San Diego last fall. But this was different. Sharper. Muskier. Like something you'd borrow from someone else. Or pick up off someone else's neck. She said nothing. Neither did I. But I caught her watching me out of the corner of her eye, quick, darting glances that vanished when I turned my head. She sat still, her body angled slightly toward the door, one leg crossed neatly over the other. If I hadn't seen what I'd seen, I might have believed her performance. But the memory of her smile, her ease, her laughter, it was branded in my mind now. And I knew. The laughter she shared tonight wasn't for me. It hadn't been for a long time. We pulled into the driveway of our quiet suburban home where everything still looked perfect, where the porch light was still on, where the flowers I'd planted last spring were still blooming. She got out of the car, wrapped her coat around her tighter as if the night had suddenly turned cold, and walked to the door without waiting for me. I followed, each step heavy with the weight of unspoken truth. Inside, she kicked off her heels, went to the kitchen, and started making tea, routine, rehearsed, like always. I stood by the doorway and watched her move. Every action felt scripted. Too smooth. Too automatic. I wondered if this was how people behaved after betrayal, if the motions of domestic life simply continued like clockwork even when trust had been silently destroyed. She asked if I wanted tea and I said no. She didn't press. We went to bed without another word. She curled away from me facing the wall. I stared at the ceiling. I couldn't sleep. My mind played that moment again and again, the whisper, the touch, the laugh. It looped like a broken record even after her breathing softened and deepened beside me. And for the first time since we married, I felt like I didn't know the person lying next to me. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. I felt erased. Replaced by someone who made her laugh when I wasn't looking. The next morning, I woke before Lauren. The sun had barely risen, the sky outside the window still painted in deep blue and muted orange. Her back was still turned toward me, her breathing steady. For a moment, I stared at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that what I saw the night before could have been nothing, maybe a misunderstanding, a misread moment, a bad joke. But it stayed with me like something carved beneath the skin. I went downstairs to make coffee. The kitchen was still dark. Even the silence felt different now, like it had weight. I moved slowly, deliberately. I couldn't stop thinking about the perfume in the car and how she didn't even flinch when I said nothing. How she never asked if something was wrong. As the coffee brewed, I leaned against the counter and let my thoughts spiral through months, maybe a year, of little things I hadn't questioned at the time. Her late nights at work, always on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She claimed they were standard meetings that always ran long. Sometimes she'd even bring home a few folders to make it look real. I used to smile when she walked in the door late, apologizing and asking what we should order for dinner. I used to think it was nice that she worked hard, ambitious, that she cared. Now I realized it had always been the same nights. Never once random. Once or twice, she came home wearing makeup when she'd left without it. Lipstick faintly smudged, cheeks with a subtle flush like she'd reapplied blush in a rush. I'd noticed, of course, but told myself it was nothing. Maybe she touched up before a client meeting. Maybe the day ran long and she got a little sweaty. But deep down, I think I'd always known. I just didn't want to see it clearly. She kept her phone face down, always. That wasn't a new habit. She said it was because she didn't want work calls or emails distracting her during our time. I believed her. I was proud of her boundary setting. God, I was proud. Now it just made my stomach turn. And then there was that one time maybe a month ago when I accidentally turned on the Bluetooth speaker in the garage. I was grabbing a wrench from the toolbox, meant to play a podcast while I worked. The speaker paired instantly to her phone instead. A song began to play. Not one of ours, not one I'd ever heard. Sultry, soft. A woman's voice humming something that sounded more like seduction than music. I thought it was strange, but she came rushing in a moment later, flushed and tense. I was using it for yoga, she'd said. Yoga. She hadn't done yoga in 6 months. And now that I was looking clearly, really examining the small pieces scattered across the past year, it was like pulling a thread that unraveled everything. Every inconsistency, every moment of my own silence, every small smile I forced when something felt off, it all aligned now. A pattern hiding in plain sight. There was one name that had popped up more than once on her phone when I glanced at it in passing. Always the same initial, J, no last name. Just J. Sometimes followed by an emoji. Once it was a heart. Another time, a winking face. I asked her about it once in a half-joking way. She laughed. Said it was Jessica, a woman in her office who was always too cheerful. That night, I believed her. This morning, I didn't. I sat down at the table with my coffee and scrolled through my own phone, pulling up the family calendar. Every appointment, every trip, every meeting she'd entered. Business trip to Phoenix last March. Conference in Houston, early June. Dinner with clients in late July. And every single time, I remembered that she came home with a smile, with leftovers, with a story rehearsed just enough to seem natural. I'd never questioned it. Never checked her flights. Never asked for hotel details. Why would I? I thought I was one of the lucky ones, the ones who didn't need to spy to feel secure. She came downstairs 2 hours later. Hair damp from a shower, dressed in that slate gray blouse I once told her brought out her eyes. She smiled as she walked in, completely at ease. Her ability to act, to hold her secrets so calmly, almost impressed me. Almost? Morning, she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I let her. I don't know why. Morning, I replied, and I was surprised at how normal my voice sounded. She poured herself coffee, stirred it quietly, and talked about some team meeting that afternoon. Something about a client call and needing to pick up dry cleaning. I watched her as she moved around the kitchen as though nothing had changed. And maybe for her, nothing had. But for me, the fabric of everything we'd built was stained now. It didn't matter that the floors were clean or the breakfast plates neatly stacked in the drying rack. There was a smudge that wouldn't wash away, no matter how well she hid it behind her perfect routine. I noticed it again when she went back upstairs. Her phone was still in her hand, still face down. I stood there for a long time after she left. The house felt too quiet again. I walked through the rooms like a stranger, touched the edge of the couch where we used to sit and watch movies on Fridays. I opened the hall closet and stared at the jackets hanging side by side, hers and mine, symbols of a togetherness I now knew was only one-sided. Later that evening, while she was still out, I sat on the back porch and opened the note app on my phone. I started writing everything I remembered, not to prove anything to her, but to remind myself that I hadn't imagined it. That my instincts weren't broken. That I hadn't gone blind. March 12th, she said she was at a training, but I saw charges on the card from a hotel in San Marcos. April 9th, came home with a new necklace. Said it was from her sister. Her sister was in Vermont that week. June 3rd, she was out with coworkers. Found a wine receipt in her jacket pocket for a table for two. July 16th, asked me to pick up her dry cleaning. A red lace dress I'd never seen before was inside the bag. October 14th, she came home late, flushed. Claimed traffic. But I checked the GPS history. The location showed an apartment complex on the east side of town. It was all there. Stains. Clues. Footprints across what used to be our shared life. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there, compiling evidence in silence like some amateur detective trying to solve the mystery of his own marriage. But it wasn't a mystery anymore. It was just a story I hadn't wanted to read. And now I couldn't unread it. I didn't sleep that night. The house was dark, quiet, familiar in the worst way. Lauren fell asleep beside me like she always did, softly, peacefully, without a clue that I hadn't closed my eyes once. I lay there with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above us, each rotation cutting the air like a silent clock counting down to something I could no longer avoid. The weight of everything, the months of doubt, the perfume, the names, the pattern of her deception had finally become too much. At 4:12 a.m. I got out of bed. The floor creaked. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. I slipped into the hallway, turned on my phone's flashlight, and walked to the guest room closet where we kept things we no longer used, old boxes, worn photo albums, cords for electronics we didn't even own anymore. In the far back was her old laptop. She'd used it up until about a year ago when she claimed it had started glitching and bought herself a sleek new one. She never offered to throw the old one away. Just said she'd back up everything important later. She never did. I carried it downstairs and placed it on the kitchen table. It still held a slight film of dust on the lid. I opened it, plugged it in, and waited for the dull glow of the screen to come to life. No password screen. It booted straight to desktop. That already felt like something Lauren never left anything unguarded. I clicked through folders at random, documents, pictures, downloads. Mostly old work spreadsheets, vacation photos, grocery lists. I was about to give up when I noticed a folder buried under a bland name, Client Archive Q4. Something about the title felt too neat. I opened it. Inside were 3 zipped files. All password protected. I sat back in my chair, pulse rising. I almost closed the lid. I almost told myself I was losing it, that this was a violation, that I should just talk to her. But we were far past that now. She'd violated our life in ways I was only beginning to comprehend. I tried the obvious passwords, our wedding anniversary, her birthday, the name of our dog who died last year. Nothing worked. I tried Josh. It didn't open the first 2 files. But the third one clicked open without hesitation. Inside was a list of backup messages. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Just strings of timestamps, initials, chat codes. Then I clicked one file labeled February, April Archive. The screen loaded a simple text window. It was a message thread. From Lauren to Josh. The first one was short. Same room. Same time. Bring wine this time. I'll bring the rest. I felt my throat tighten. I scrolled. I still smell you on my skin. Don't wash it off yet. Then a reply. I miss you naked. That Wednesday felt like something out of a movie. The timestamps matched nights she had claimed to be working late or attending conferences. I recognized the names of hotels. The tone was casual, playful, int asterisk mate, like they didn't think twice, like I didn't exist. There were photos, too, buried in one subfolder, marked with a random string of numbers. I didn't want to open them. I did anyway. Lauren, in our bedroom mirror, wearing black lace lingerie I'd never seen before. Her lips painted, hair tousled, a soft smile on her face. The photo was taken in early March. The same day she said she was in Houston for client onboarding. I checked the date twice. I remembered she texted me that night around 10:30, saying the hotel bed was uncomfortable. I closed the image. My hands were shaking. I wasn't just dealing with flirtation with texts that crossed a line. This wasn't some vague emotional affair. It was physical, intentional, repeated, calculated. I kept reading. In one message, she asked if he remembered the red heels she wore in Phoenix. Said she still had the bite mark on her shoulder. She followed that message with a kiss emoji. It wasn't just the S*X. It was how ordinary they made it feel. As if they hadn't destroyed anything. As if they'd never been afraid of being found out. I sat there for nearly an hour, rereading the same 6 or 7 exchanges. My heart beat slowly. Couldn't cry. Couldn't even feel angry yet. All I felt was cold. Like I had stepped out of my own life and walked into someone else's. Someone who had been living next to me, in my home, in my bed, but never actually beside me. At 5:53 a.m., I closed the laptop. I wiped the table clean with a dishcloth. I placed the laptop back in the closet. And then I sat on the couch until the sun started to rise, lighting up the living room inch by inch, turning every familiar shape into something foreign. The lamp, the rug, the framed wedding photo on the shelf above the TV. I stared at our frozen smiles in that photo and felt nauseous. That smile on her face had been real once, but I no longer knew who that woman was. When Lauren came downstairs an hour later, dressed and polished, holding her travel mug of tea, she greeted me with the same bright smile she always used. "Wish me luck," she said. "Presentation day." I said nothing. I just nodded. She kissed my forehead. I stayed still. She left, and I sat in that same spot for 2 more hours, staring at the door she'd walked through. There was nothing left to ask her. The answers had already been given. In files she thought she'd buried, in photos she took with a smile, in messages filled with warmth that didn't belong to me. The betrayal was no longer hidden by words. It had become them. By the time Lauren came home that evening, I was gone. I didn't write a note. I didn't pack a suitcase with the neatness of a man who planned his exit carefully. I grabbed a duffel bag from the hall closet, tossed in whatever I could find. 2 shirts, socks, underwear, a pair of jeans, my phone charger, my shaving kit. I didn't even take my laptop. There was nothing on it I needed. I left my wedding ring on the edge of the sink in the downstairs bathroom. Not as a statement, not as some dramatic final gesture. I just couldn't wear it anymore. I drove aimlessly at first. I wasn't sure where I was going until I found myself on the old rural road that curved around Lake Travis. It was the kind of place I hadn't thought about in years. Quiet, familiar in a distant way. And then I remembered my uncle's cabin. It was a small, 1-story wooden place just off the water, barely used since he passed. My father had offered it to me once when Lauren and I were looking for a honeymoon spot, but we chose Cancun instead. More romantic, she said back then. More appropriate. The cabin was too rustic, too remote. I hadn't been there since I was a teenager, but I remembered every turn on the gravel path that led to it. When I got there, the door creaked like it always had. Dust hung in the air like fog trapped in amber. The place smelled like old pine, lake wind, and time. I flipped the light switch, nothing. I lit the candle on the table using an old matchbook I found in a drawer. The flame wavered, catching the shape of the room. A small table, a couch with a plaid blanket, shelves filled with fishing gear and unread books. No photos, no reminders, no Lauren. I sat on the edge of the couch and stayed there for hours. No distractions, no phone calls. Just the dull throb of betrayal pressing into every part of my body like a second pulse. I reread her messages in my head word for word. I didn't need the files anymore. I remembered the phrases like lyrics of a cruel song, "No one will find out." "I miss you naked." Same room, same time. Her voice, once soothing in the back of my mind, had been replaced by these quotes. And I hated how vividly I could picture the moments she described, not because I'd seen them, but because I knew her. Knew the way she laughed when she felt seen. Knew the softness in her voice when she whispered something meant to feel secret. That softness hadn't been mine for a long time. I just hadn't noticed. Or maybe I had, but I chose to believe she was just tired. Busy. Stressed. Denial, I realized, is its own kind of betrayal. And I'd betrayed myself more times than she had. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced from wall to wall in the cabin, listening to the lake wind rattle the windows. My thoughts wouldn't settle. They circled like buzzards. I wondered how many times she had smiled at me while making plans with someone else. I wondered if she felt relief after lying or if the deception had become second nature. Maybe she even felt a kind of thrill. At 3 a.m. she texted me. "Lauren, where are you? Are you okay?" A short message. Formal. Almost polite. I didn't answer. At 7:12 a.m. another message came. "Lauren, I don't know what you found, but I think we should talk. I want to explain." I turned my phone off. Tossed it into the drawer where my uncle used to keep fishing hooks. What explanation could fix this? What version of her story could make the photos disappear? Could make the messages unread? Could make the scent in the car not belong to another man? That day passed like molasses. I sat on the dock for hours, letting my feet dangle above the water. I stared at the trees reflected in the ripples, trying to remember who I was before this. Before my marriage became a performance. Before my home became a theater for someone else's affair. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just existed in the absence of everything. And still, there were more messages. "Lauren, I'm not proud of what happened. Please let me explain. We can fix this. Lauren, I know you're hurt. I am too. But running away won't solve it. Lauren, please. Let's talk. Just once." I didn't open them. I only saw the previews on my lock screen. I didn't delete them either. They felt like a record, a trail of something unraveling. That night, I lit another candle and sat at the table in the dark. I tried to write something down, a letter to her, maybe. Something to put an end to this. But my pen hovered over the page and nothing came. What do you say to someone who broke everything you gave them? There's no language for that. Only silence. On the third day, I thought about calling my father. I wanted to hear a voice that didn't lie to me. But I couldn't bring myself to explain what happened. Saying it out loud would make it feel more real than I was ready to accept. So I walked. Miles along the shoreline. Through trees I remembered from childhood. Past rocks I used to skip when I was 12 and full of wonder. Now I was 37 and full of emptiness. I imagined Lauren at home, in our kitchen, maybe rereading old texts, maybe looking at the sink where I'd left my ring. Maybe pacing. Maybe rehearsing the version of the story she'd eventually try to sell me. Maybe Josh was still texting her, or maybe he'd gone silent the second she told him she got caught. Cowards always vanish when there's wreckage. I didn't know what she felt, and I realized I didn't care. What I felt, that was all I could handle. And what I felt was this: I couldn't go back. Not just to her, but to that version of myself who believed in her. That man didn't exist anymore. And even if I stood in front of the mirror, even if I wore the same clothes, brushed the same teeth, and sat in the same bed, I would never again be him. I was someone else now. Someone who understood what it meant to be lied to with a smile. Someone who knew how betrayal didn't start with an affair, it started with silence, indifference, and eyes that no longer sparkled when they looked at you. At midnight, I turned my phone back on. Dozens of messages buzzed in. Missed calls. Voicemails. All from her. The last one simply said, "Lauren, if you ever loved me at all, please let me see you." But love wasn't the question anymore. The question was, can I love myself enough to walk away? And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I finally had an answer. I agreed to meet her on the 5th day. Not because I wanted closure. Not because I believed anything she'd say would make the truth more bearable. But because I needed to look her in the eyes and confirm that what I saw in those messages, the version of her I didn't recognize, was real. I needed to know that the woman I married was gone and not coming back, even if her voice sounded the same. I picked a roadside cafe about 40 minutes from town. One of those places that used to be a gas station but was converted into a hipster brunch spot with string lights and concrete floors. I chose it because we'd never been there together. It held no memories. No echoes of anniversaries, no birthdays, no laughter that would poison the moment. She was already there when I arrived. Sitting by the window in a plain beige coat, no makeup, hair tied back. She looked like someone trying to be humble, to strip away all the polish and pretense, but the effort was too visible. The simplicity itself felt like a costume. Her hands were wrapped around a coffee mug. When she saw me, she didn't smile. That at least I appreciated. I sat down across from her. Said nothing. She waited a beat, then exhaled through her nose, a nervous sound, and started talking. "I know you found the messages," she said. I nodded. Her eyes flicked down to the table, then back up. "I guess I always knew this day would come. I just thought I'd be able to fix it before it did." She took a sip of her coffee. Her hands trembled slightly. Josh's was a colleague. He works in our East Regional office. I met him during a leadership conference in Phoenix last year. It wasn't supposed to be anything. It was one night. I thought it would end there. It didn't, I wanted to say. But I said nothing. He was charming. Persistent. And I felt, she paused, trying to find the right word, seen. That word hit me harder than I expected. Seen. Not loved. Not respected. Not understood. Just seen. As if my existence, my presence in our life, our home, had become invisible to her. I didn't plan it. It just kept happening. Business trips. Late nights. It was like a version of me I didn't recognize and didn't want to stop being. There it was. The admission. Not an apology, not really. More like someone finally reading their lines after skipping pages in a script. Her voice wasn't shaky anymore. She had rehearsed this. Maybe in the mirror. Maybe with friends. Maybe in her own mind at night while lying beside me. She looked at me now directly, as if gauging whether I was breaking or hardening. I ended it. A month ago. Before you found out. I tilted my head slightly. Why? She blinked. Because I started to feel guilty. I gave her nothing. No reaction. But inside, the words turned to glass. Guilty, not remorseful. Not repentant. Guilt is about being caught. Remorse is about being sorry. One is fear. The other is grief. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. And I'm not asking for it. I need you to know it wasn't about you. It was about me. I felt like I was disappearing in my own life. You were always steady, always strong, and I needed someone who wasn't me, I said, finishing the sentence for her. She swallowed. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. I hate what I did, she whispered. I hate that I broke what we had. What we had. As if it had been a vase dropped on accident. I looked at her, really looked at her. The face I'd woken up beside for almost 10 years. The mouth I had kissed on bad days, the eyes that once softened when they looked at me. And I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel love. I didn't even feel loss. I felt distance. Like she was a person I'd once known at a different stage of my life, a college roommate, a childhood friend, someone with whom the connection had long since faded, but whose presence still stirred faint echoes. I can go to therapy, she said suddenly. I already booked a session. I'll quit my job if that's what it takes. I'll change everything. Just tell me what to do. I leaned back in the chair. You can't change the past, I said. You can only live with it. She reached across the table, placed her hand over mine. I didn't move. But I didn't close around her fingers either. I know I hurt you, she said. No, I corrected. You ended us. A flicker of pain crossed her face. You want me to beg? She asked. Is that what this is? No, I said. I came here to see you. To confirm what I already know. She dropped her hand. Pulled it back to her lap like she'd touched something hot. I don't know how to be without you, she said, voice cracking. I've built my whole world around us. But I wasn't your world, I said. Not really. I was the man you shared a house with while living another life. We sat in silence. The cafe buzzed softly around us, plates clinking, a baby crying somewhere near the door. But in that moment, it felt like we were in a bubble. Untouchable. Unrepairable. Finally, she said, what happens now? I looked out the window. A car passed. A bird landed on the power line. You get to live with what you did, I said. And I get to decide how far I want to be from it. Her shoulders sank. I stood up. I'll come by this week for my things. Brandon, I don't hate you, I said. But I don't believe you anymore. And that's worse. I walked out before she could answer. Didn't look back. Didn't wait for the tears. I didn't want to see the woman who suddenly realized she couldn't undo what she'd done. I got in my car and sat there for a while, staring at the wheel. My hands were steady. And I felt, for the first time since the day I saw her laughing with him, like I knew who I was again. In the days that followed, I didn't cry. I didn't lash out. I simply moved through the motions of letting go. I packed boxes in silence, item by item, memory by memory. Each photo frame, each book, each shirt I hadn't worn in months felt like a weight I was no longer willing to carry. Lauren sent a few more messages, some apologizing, some angry, some confused. But I didn't answer. I realized I wasn't trying to heal the marriage anymore because it no longer existed. It had died long before I found those messages. The laughter in Phoenix, the photos in her phone, they hadn't destroyed something whole. They had only revealed a truth I refused to see. We had already become strangers under the same roof. She asked if we could start over. But how do you rebuild something with someone who watched it burn? 2 days later, I returned to the house one last time. I packed the final box, loaded it into the car, and turned to find Lauren standing barefoot at the doorway, tears silently tracking down her face. She begged. Said she'd do anything. That I was her best friend. That she'd change. But I had changed too. I didn't leave to hurt her. I left to find air again. I left because staying meant erasing myself every day in service of a life that had already erased me. That evening, I sent her one last message. You laughed with him while I stood beside you. Now you're alone. That's fair. Then I deleted her number. And for the first time in a long while, I felt light. Free. Mine.